Begin.
Okay. Gracious Heavenly Father, as we come before you today, we thank you for this opportunity that we have to open your word. We thank you for the opportunity we have to learn more of that which you would have us to know for this, the time that we are in. We pray, Father, for our brothers and sisters all over this world. We ask, Father, for your guidance, for your direction, and for your blessing as we open your word, so that we may come to understand, that we may come to know that which will be necessary for us to know as we face times that are soon to come upon us. Help us now, guide us, so that we may follow you, may walk with you, and may learn of you. For this, we thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. So today we're going to be continuing on in the study of Esther. We have quite a bit to go into. So what I'm doing right now is I'm getting this ready to share screen. Okay. Now, I'm going to recap just a little bit on what we talked about last week, and then we're going to go into Esther 4. Did we clearly understand this last week, the relationship between who Haman was and who Mordecai was? Do we have any questions on this?
I don't think we should have questions on, because it's pretty clear that they go back, Mordecai, he goes back to Kish, and Haman goes back to King Agag.
Okay.
Right. So this is basically, if you want to call it, an old rivalry that's being played out again.
Okay. Now, one of the points that I looked at after last week's session, how many princes were outlined as being the chief men that were before the king?
7.
Exactly. Now, we find those 7 princes listed in Esther 1:14. And to read that quickly. And next unto him, next unto the king, were Karshena, Shethar, Adamatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face and which sat first in the kingdom. So where's Mordecai and where is Haman? Are they mentioned there?
Nope. No, they're not mentioned.
Okay, so consider this. You have Ahasuerus, you have these 7 princes, and now you're going to show that Haman enters the stage, and so does Mordecai. How many does that make?
Well, if the 7 are still there, that would be 9.
If the 7 are still there with the king,
Well, that'd be 10 with the king.
We'd be talking 10 with the king.
Yeah.
So I was intrigued by that part. So here are these 7 princes, and Haman is promoted to the 2nd position over those other 7. And that's all of a sudden you have this happening. So that must mean then that in order to have been promoted like that, that Haman was known to the king. Can we agree on that?
Yeah. Now, of course, you're dealing with chapter 1. You're dealing with the 3rd year of Xerxes. Right. In chapter 3, you're dealing with the 12th year.
I think we're dealing with the 7th year.
7th year. Yeah, 7th year. It's going to be, where's the 12th year come into play?
We're just about to touch on that.
Okay, yeah, because I know I was supposed to draw this out, a chronology of it, but I haven't got around to it. So where do we have, so we have the 7th year. Isn't that where, no, the 7th year is where they choose a queen, right? That's chapter 2. And then chapter 3 is the 12th year.
Okay.
Right? Because chapter 1 is the 3rd year, chapter 2 is the 7th year, and chapter 3 is the 12th year. That's okay. Stephen, correct?
Stephen, yeah, I tend to think that it's the 12th year that Haman came in. But
Esther 3:7, it says in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, because you use that in your calculation. 12th year, 12th month, 13th day of the month. You multiply that together and you get 1872.
Okay.
1/10 of that symbol we use for July 1820.
Okay.
Right. And then and in chapter 2, when they choose Esther, that was in the 7th year. So this is after they had, because originally in chapter 1, they're planning this campaign against Greece. And then they carry out the campaign against Greece about 3 years later. And then it's after he comes back from that campaign, then he wants to choose a wife again. And that's when he chooses Esther.
But I think
go
ahead.
The context seems to be that Haman was promoted before his 12th year, but we aren't given that year though.
Right. So it's before. So somewhere between the 3rd year and the 12th year, Haman has been promoted. And we don't know the conditions. So one of the things that we can surmise, at least, is that in the 1st year, we know that Haman is at least not one of the princes. Whether he's involved in the government or not, we don't know. Now, we find from the Apocrypha, it suggests that he's a Macedonian, which would be, the northern empire of Greece, northern part of Greece. Now, because this could be significant. I mean, we don't know for certain why he's there. But there could be some way in which he's seen as some sort of ally that's been brought into his government. Maybe he's opposed to Greece, or he's posturing in some way. So it's hard to say, but he's definitely, even though he's a descendant of Agag, he did, according to the Apocrypha, live in Macedonia, or he's a citizen of Macedonia. So we're not sure if that's correct or not, but the possibility is that Haman is seeking in some way. He's politically working for obviously himself for the most part, but maybe even for Greece. It's possible. You know, that he's some kind of espionage going on.
One of the points that I looked at, Alexander's father, his name was Philip, but what was his full title?
I don't know.
Philip II of Macedon.
Okay, right. That I remember now.
So even Alexander, he was, I believe, Alexander III of Macedon.
Yeah.
So if Haman was seen as being Macedonian, then he was part of that area that Philip and Alexander were from,
Right.
of which they ruled.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, he was a descendant of Agag.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you were pointing out before, the war that Ahasuerus had with Greece, that started in Thermopylae,
Mm-hmm.
would have taken place about the 6th year of his reign.
Yeah, so it was in 580.
Okay.
And the third year was 583.
Right. So there's quite a bit for us to address, and it's incumbent upon me as well to try to put something together on a line to come back to see what we may be able to see from this and what relevance there is, especially for our own time. So I'll try to get some of that set up to you later this week.
Yeah, well, while you're doing this, I'm going to draw it on a line. You know, like, and then we can look at it if you want.
Okay, sure.
So you can just keep teaching. I'll be listening, but I'll be drawing too.
Okay, so part of what I had looked at and was going over this last week is this relationship and why it was so important for us to note this with Haman. Now, identifying the Amalekites becomes a point that we're going to need to pay attention with. Part of this, I went back to what Sister White had written, and she had an excellent article from Signs of the Times, August 24th of 1882. I'm going to read briefly some of what she wrote here in relation to what we're addressing. The Amalekites were a wandering people inhabiting the wilderness to the south of Palestine, between that country and Egypt. Like most of the neighboring tribes, they were idolaters and bitter enemies of Israel. Soon after the Exodus, they attacked the Israelites in the desert of Rephidim, but were signally defeated by Joshua. The Amalekites were not among the nations whose lands were granted to Israel, nor had they received any injury from them. This assault was, therefore, wholly unprovoked. It was also most cowardly and cruel, the foe, not daring to risk an open encounter with the Hebrews, had attacked and slain those who from feebleness and exhaustion had fallen behind the body of the host. Moses was commanded to preserve a record of the battle and also of the final doom of the idolatrous people, as pronounced by God himself. I will blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven, because the hand of Amalek is against the throne of Jehovah. Now, when we go to look at this, this is part of the marginal reading of Exodus 17:16. The Lord of all the earth had fixed his throne in Israel and had shown his glorious power and majesty in bringing the chosen people from bondage in Egypt. When Amalek made an assault upon them, he attacked the throne of God, who determined to vindicate his authority as a warning to all future generations. After denouncing judgments against the Amalekites, the Lord waited long for them to turn from their evil ways. But they went on in sin until their iniquity had reached its height, till their day of probation ended, and divine justice demanded their destruction. That wicked people were dwelling in God's world, the house which he had prepared for his faithful, obedient children. Yet they appropriated his gifts to their own use, without one thought of the giver. The more blessings he poured upon them, the more boldly they transgressed against him. Thus they continued to pervert his blessings and abuse his mercy. They strengthened their souls in iniquity, but God kept silent. And they said in their hearts, how doth God know? And is there knowledge with the Most High? But the dark record of their crimes is constantly passing up to heaven. There is a limit beyond which men may not go on in sin. When that limit had been passed, God arose in his indignation to put them out of the house which they had polluted. So here we have an example of God giving time for this people that had received so many blessings to turn from the ways that they chose and to come to God in repentance and faith, and to give thanks for all of the blessings that he provided. But they chose not to do so. There are many applications that can be made of this part. In this situation, the Amalekites, the Agagites, had chosen not to follow God, but to follow their own hearts. And this serves as a warning to us today. Now, as we look at this in the story of Esther, we can see how Haman was progressing, but there's quite a bit more that we're going to be looking at within this portion of this book.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, the interesting thing about the Amalekites and then getting to King Agag, is it starts when the Israelites leave Egypt, as we know.
Right.
And then it ties us with, Ellen White says, 400 years.
Right.
So there's a time prophecy attached to it. And then, of course, the judgment's supposed to be executed, but it's not really completed. Saul doesn't really fulfill the role the way that God had prescribed it, which means that you're going to still have Agag and his descendants now come to play in this history in the book of Esther. And
right.
And there's a lot in there. So, I mean, it seems like, well, we just have this simple connection. But it brings us back also to the 400 years that's mentioned in Genesis 15, even though that's a different period of 400 years. Because that's the 400 years in which they're afflicted, beginning with Ishmael mocking Isaac at his weaning, and that affliction continuing all through Egypt, and then they're delivered. So there's those 400 years provide a parallel, one for God's people in being persecuted, and another in the world in opposition to God's people and in their wickedness. So there's these two different periods of 400 years. And I don't know the full significance of it, but I do know that they're connected. And now we're going to see here at this point where, the temple has already been rebuilt. The third decree is going to be coming. And now God's people who are in Babylon, in Persia, but, in Babylon, they're going to go through this experience that is a type of the Sunday law. So there's something to it that we don't fully see yet. Now, do you want me to just go over this chronology on the line up there?
Sure.
So yeah, unshare your screen there. And
all right.
Even if you can kind of provide some of these dates for me, can you do that? Like the dates on the Julian calendar as I go through this?
Right, okay.
So what we see.
Do you need more light?
Is, hang on, what's that?
Do you need more light in the room?
Yeah, if you want to put more light. Okay, so I just have to get this so the recording gets my screen. So what we see here, this is 583 on the left. And you can see this first day of the first month going to the 10th day of the 7th month is this 187 days. Obviously first 180 and then 7. Now, I don't know, Stephen might have the Julian dates for those. I don't know if he does. But they weren't really significant, at least in my understanding. What were the dates?
I'll have to bring it up.
Okay, well, don't worry about it right now.
Okay.
And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the 7th year. So let's look at this one. This one's more important. This is Esther chapter 2. And I need the biblical dates here. So she's going to, in the 7th year, and what are the months that are given us in chapter 2? So it's in the 7th year of Xerxes. And if somebody wants to look up the Battle of Thermopylae or the Persia's campaign against Greece, because that's in 580, that's in the 6th year. If we could have the dates for that.
The
480.
Okay, 480? Hey, I got to change all these. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
I always know when it is, but it's like some kind of mental thing.
Second guessing or something?
No, it's just I always write 5 instead of 4, even though I know it's 4. Okay, so yeah, so the Battle of Thermopylae is in 480 BC. But in the 7th year, Stephen, what do we have for the dates of Esther's purification and so forth? What does it say?
Well, verse 16 of chapter 2 says it's December the 22nd, 749. Sorry, 479.
Yeah, so what's the biblical date first?
10th month and the 7th year. I'm trying to find the actual day.
Well, we know it's the 10th, so it's in the 10th month anyway in 479. And that's when her purification begins? Or is that when it ends?
That's when she's taken into the king.
Right. So anyway, it's going to be in the 10th month. You say it's December 22nd, but...
I think you think it's maybe... yeah, I don't know where you got so exact on it.
Yeah, I don't know either. Because that was a long time ago. So maybe it's just December 22nd is the first day of the 10th month. That could have been what I was implying, and that would be the first day of the 10th month. So maybe I'm just assuming, since it says the 10th month, it's assuming the first day of the 10th month. So we'll put that there. Okay, now she has had a period of purifying, was how long? 6 months or something?
I think it's about a year.
It was about a year?
Correct, it's 1 year. 6
Okay.
months with oils, six months with sweet odors.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at somewhere here, and I don't know why I put it, okay, December, that'd be about there, somewhere over here. So this is Esther 2, we'll call it. Esther 2. So it's this period of time in here. So this is December of 480 BC to December of 479. Does anybody have the dates for the Battle of Thermopylae?
All I found is a general date that the battle took place sometime during August of 480, which biblically would transmit to either the 24th of Tammuz or beginning about the 1st of Ab.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a period of time in here from when that battle is lost. The one battle that's important is the battle on the ocean. I can't remember what it's called.
Begins with S.
Yeah, Salmas or something like that.
Salamis.
Okay.
Yeah. So we know this was all over in the summer of 480.
Right.
So what's that?
There was a battle afterwards as well.
Yeah.
Called in Plataea.
Yeah, Plataea. Both of those are sort of together. But this would have been in the summer, wouldn't it have been? You're not going to have your ships battling in the winter on the ocean, on the Mediterranean.
Not likely.
Yeah.
So you have
it's going to be in the summer.
Yeah, so it's in the summer. So anyway, we got Esther 2 in here. And then this event here, it's going to start on the 13th day of the first month is when that decree is going to be issued. And then it's going to go into effect on the 12th day, or the 13th day, pardon me, of the 12th month. Now this is still, whoops, I need to put it here. So this would be in here. So it's in the 12th, I'm doing this wrong. So this is, I'll do it like this. So this is at the beginning of that year, and this is going to be in the 12th month. So this is his year. So it's going to be in 473, the 13th day of the 12th month. And that's going to be April, what was it again? April 12th, April 16th, something like that. I can't remember.
Just a moment.
Yeah, hold on a second.
But it's in 473, as you can see.
The 16th.
16th, okay. Yeah, so you can see this timeline. Way back here, he's planning this battle against Greece, the campaign against Greece, planning it here. And then it's implemented 3 years later. And then when he gets back from the battle, he picks Esther, and then she goes through this purification process, and then she becomes his wife sometime after December 22nd, 479. And then you have this period of time in here, and we're not sure when Haman is lifted up as the second in command, but it's probably sometime in this history. Well, it's obviously here between the 3rd year and the 12th year. So you know, that's what we do know. And then finally in the 12th year, this issue happens, and then it's going to be completed at the end of the 12th year of Xerxes. So hopefully that helps people. I'll try to draw this out in a little bit more detail, make sure I get the dates all correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Stephen.
I'm just looking at your chronology for Esther. And you have like a year between from when he cast lots. see.
when it goes into effect.
Yeah, well, you have it, the Casper, you have it in April in 474 in the 12th year.
Oh, sorry, I had that wrong.
And then the king's called, the king's scribe is called, you have that then a couple of weeks later. The 12th year, the 13th day, the first month. So that's April the 16th, 474.
Oh,
And then the date set for the destruction of the Jews is the 5th of April.
oh, so the date, yeah, it's 5th of April, 473.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is April 5th.
The 5th day of the 4th month.
Yeah, as a symbol. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So 5th day of the 4th month. We'll just say it this way on our calendar. So that's midnight, of course. So that's significant. And then this one is the one that's April 16th, the 13th day of the first month.
Yes.
Okay.
You have it in 474 BC.
Yeah, it's in 474.
13, not
Okay.
16th day of April.
No, 13. Oh, is it?
Yeah, April 13th day of the first month
Okay,
in
no, I got
474
confused. Sorry.
is, yeah, so it's in 474 because it's at the beginning. And then,
Yes.
right?
That's fine.
So I did it right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now while you're at the board,
Yeah.
did we ever come to a consensus as to how we were viewing the 127 provinces?
I'm not sure what you're asking, how we're viewing them in what way.
There's a reason that there's 127 provinces, right?
Yeah. So I took it as a symbol that relates to July 21st, reading it backwards.
Okay, then we're on the same page.
Yeah, okay.
Because I was looking at that and I'm going, okay, if I reverse 127, if I do a perfect reversal of that, it comes right to 721.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Which is a symbol of July 21st, which is also midnight. So we have these symbols of midnight. We have symbols of July 18th happening and July 18, 2020 happening. So, yeah, so to me, it's all very significant in how we do this. Now, just as far as, now, one of the things about these dates, we have the biblical calendar and we have the Babylonian calendar. And back when I was doing this, I hadn't really sorted out everything in regarding to, how the calendars worked. So I need to look at that again. But what I can say, if I look at the Babylonian calendar converter I have, and I take this, these dates here. So I'm going to go to the 12th year of Xerxes, and I'm going to go back to Nisan, and okay, so I got to go back here. Day to, oh, I'm doing the month thing. Hang on. And that's the 13th day. I have here April 17th on the Babylonian calendar. So the other one was the biblical calendar date, I believe. If somebody looks at the calendar converter, they could see. So that's 474 BC. So I have a different date. It's April 17th instead of April 16th. And then if I go to the date that we have marked as the 5th day of April 5th. Just hang on. April 5th is the date. So even on the Babylonian calendar. So in that case, it happens to line up with the biblical calendar. So April 5th is the 13th day of the 12th month in 573. So again, we have that midnight symbolism, 5th day of the 4th month, along with 12 times 12 times 12 is 1872. So pretty significant dates.
Well, what I was looking at is taking this 127 provinces reversed.
Yeah.
And I know this might be a strange thought, but I was equating that with Methuselah. And then taking the other that we're looking at here about midnight and being equivalent to the 969 years where Methuselah died before the flood.
Okay, explain again so you're taking what are you doing to get to the 969 years?
Okay, when Enoch named his son, he named him Methuselah.
Yeah.
When he dies, it will come.
Yeah.
And then for 969 years, Methuselah lived on the earth until finally he died. And when he died, they knew that this prophecy was going to be fulfilled, but they didn't know exactly when.
Yeah.
So,
what's the significance of 969 as a number? I'm not following that part.
Just in that it was the age at where Methuselah died.
Okay.
So what I was wondering is if this was not a couple of symbolic references to the Jews knowing that something was going to occur while there was 127 provinces under these Persian kings, and that by the time that we reach this next part, that they knew that this was soon to happen. Now, in the chat, it's been brought out that there were actually 2 battles of Thermopylae. One of those was under Darius and the other was under Xerxes.
Okay, so there were 2 battles of Thermopylae involving Rome.
Okay, sorry.
So one in 191 BC, starting April 24th, and Xerxes. So one is involving Rome and the other is involving Xerxes. And that's August into September of 480, it says.
And my mistake, because I was reading from another one that was speaking of the Battle of Thermopylae's political origins can be traced back to Xerxes' predecessor, Darius I, who sent heralds to the Greek cities in 491 BC in the hopes of persuading them to accept Persian authority. This offended the proud Greeks greatly. The Athenians went so far to toss the Persian heralds into a pit, while the Spartans followed suit and tossed them into a well. In 480, Xerxes invaded Greece as a continuation of Darius' original plan. He began the same way his predecessor had. He sent heralds to Greek cities, but he skipped over Athens and Sparta because of their previous responses. Many Greek city-states either joined Xerxes or remained neutral, while Athens and Sparta led the resistance with another of other city-states behind them.
Okay.
So it's my mistake for combining the two. I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. Now, the 65 years, I'm just going back. So, Stephen, you remember exactly when you have the birth of you have Enoch, and Enoch is born to who? Can't think of his name.
The father of Enoch.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I can look it up.
I should remember these things, but I don't.
Yeah.
Because there was significant, he was 65 when he had Enoch, and then Enoch was 187 when he had Methuselah.
No. Enoch was 65
Enoch was 65.
when he had Methuselah.
Yeah, and then Methuselah was 187.
Yeah, he had Lamech.
Lamech, and then Lamech lived 777 years.
And Jared.
Yeah, Jared begat Enoch when he is 162.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it doesn't matter who, well, at least, I mean, maybe it does. But in the context here, we have the 65 years, 187, and together those are 252.
Right.
Precede 777 years for Lamech. Right, because Lamech lived 777 years. So that's the numbers that I was thinking of. And so the 777 that we have has this 252 and the 187 attached to it, plus the 65, which is part of the prophetic mirror. So all those symbols are tied together. Now, I can't remember why I was bringing them up, though. So busy thinking about it. But anyway, we do have all of these types of symbols show up. The 187 shows up in the book of Esther. And now we have this symbol for midnight showing up, along with the July 18, 2020 symbol, 1872. And because Lamech, the gematria for him, if you multiply the letters, the gematria for each letter of his name, it becomes 18720. And that was, to me, a very profound insight. Now, Stephen, who found that? Was that you or Odilio? That calculation of the gematria of Lamech?
Yeah, that was Odilio.
Okay. And there was something about when he found it, like the date he found it. Was it March 27th?
I think it was the 26th of April.
26th of April, okay. Yeah, because it's interesting. The first time I ever talked to Odilio was through Skype, and it was March 27th,
Really?
2020, which was interesting. So it was April 26th that he had found that, you think, eh? So just even the dates that we find information, or that light comes from.
2018, wasn't it?
His was 2018 that he found it?
No, the Skype meeting, it wouldn't be 2020.
No, it was in 2020. That's the first time I talked to him.
All right, okay.
Oh, no, 2019. Pardon me. 2019. You're right. It wasn't 2020. It's 2019, not 2018. Yeah, because it was when I was still living with my son there, when we were kind of homeless. So it was 2019, March 27th, 2019. I talked to him on Skype. But anyway, and then it was April 26th that year that he figured out this 18720 for Lamech's gematria, by multiplying instead of adding them together.
Yes.
Yeah. So my point is that we have these significant symbol dates in which events happen that marks us going through this time. And so we found that again and again, that we find certain light, just like Jeff did with January 11th, 2020. And yet he didn't even know that January 11th was the week of Christ date lines up with that, the 11th day of the first month. But, it ends up being on our calendar. So anyway, there's just a bunch of things that we're noticing here, that we're chatting about, that not everybody's going to follow. But what we can see here, at least in the book of Esther, is that these are significant dates. They're not just...
they're not random.
Yeah, they're not random. And that we can connect them, basically all of these things, in ways that are very profound. Okay, so you can put your screen up again there, Dwight.
No problem. Okay. So, in this, from the Bible that I use,
Your screen isn't sharing yet. Oh, it looks like he's frozen. Okay, so he froze a little bit there. Or maybe I froze.
No, I think you're all right.
Oh, I'm all right? Okay. He'll come back.
Fast and undertakes the suit.
Okay, Dwight, you froze there for a minute. So. His internet's not working too good, but.
Again, okay.
I'm surprised we don't have more technical difficulties like this.
Yeah, I think the Lord's upholding all this.
Yeah, so, I mean, the point of Stephen's sermon on Sabbath was, you know, to show this connection between basically these events. He said it better than I'm going to say it, but all these dates, all these symbols represent us moving through time, I think is kind of the point, right, Stephen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
so the measuring of the temple is the measuring of us moving through time.
Relating to numbers that we're familiar with, you know, when we're measuring it,
yeah,
it has meaning. So sometimes we can maybe relate it to time, probably mostly time, but in the symbol of 144, we can relate to a people, to a movement as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can relate it to time as well, because you have 144,000 minutes is 100 days or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Right. So these symbols relate to time, even if they do relate to a people. And you know, that was one of the things dealing with the 666, the 666 years that we had with that William Miller used to count the Roman period, which he was counting it from 158 BC to 508, to when the daily was taken away. You know, I found, of course, it's a number that we use in other ways, but I also found that there was 2 other periods of 666 years. And it also applies to Islam. It's a number of rebellion. It's connected often with the number 13. So these things happen again and again. Now, Dwight is still freezing and unfreezing, so I'm not sure exactly what's happening there.
I was looking at Genesis 14, verse 4.
Yeah.
And that's when there's mentions 5 kings or 4 kings, and they fight against the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay, so Genesis
14 verse 4, which
yeah,
kind of connects with 144,000, just as a verse, you know. And the name of the king there, Shero, I don't know how to pronounce it very well. Shidor Laomer means a handful of sheaves, which to me relates to the first fruits. And we're told in Revelation 14 that the 144,000 were the first fruits as well. But it mentions the 12th. It mentions the 12th year. This was, and then it talks about the 13th year they rebelled.
Right. So the rebellion, 13 being a symbol of rebellion.
Yeah. But that 12th year, if we consider that, there's 12 months.
Yeah.
As well. So maybe you could maybe see a symbol there of 144 months.
Yeah.
And then we've got the 13th year.
Yeah.
You say Genesis.
You multiply 13 by 144 again, you get 1872.
Yeah. Yeah, you get that same symbol. Okay, was that Jeff saying something?
Yeah, did you say Genesis chapter 4?
14 verse 4.
14, 4?
Yeah, I shared it on the screen there.
Okay, okay, I got
The
it.
12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled.
Yeah, basically I was looking up scriptures which connect the two numbers 12 and 13 together.
Yeah.
And it's basically Esther and this here, Genesis 14 as well.
Yeah.
It does mention a few other things, but it's just like, I don't think it's just like given like a chronology thing.
Okay.
Well, I mean like a listing, like a listing names.
Okay. So, but this one's significant because it's in Genesis 14:4. So the symbol of
Yes.
144. And then also the 12 years, the 12th year, 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and the 13th year they rebelled. So the 13th year would have 12 months in it. So there's 12, 13, and then 12. Now in the next verse it mentions in the 14th year.
Yeah, that's the thing.
well, that's fine, but you know that's in a different verse. But of course, this is dealing with when Abraham rescues Lot, right? So we have
yes.
This basically what they did. It says, and it came to pass in the days of Arapel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of the nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinar, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. So they joined together in the Vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. And so when it says 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and the 13th year they rebelled. So this means that they were under his control for 12 years. But then they rebelled in the 13th year. And so it's in the 14th year that he comes against them. Right? That would be how we would understand that.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And there's Dwight's coming back on. Hopefully he stays connected. Hi, Dwight.
My apology.
Not your fault. We just did a little study on Genesis 14:4.
Nice.
So, yeah, connected to Stephen's study yesterday.
Cool. I was a little frustrated because my whole system crashed.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry, just a point on the 14th year. If you consider that, and if you just consider number 14 years prophetically,
yeah,
it's 5,040 days. So you get 225/20s.
Oh,
nice.
That's cool too. See, so there's a purpose in that story as a symbol. So we can tie the symbols of that story to our lines.
Right.
Just like we're doing with Esther. Okay, so we're at Esther chapter 4 now?
Yep.
Okay.
So as I was starting, the breakdowns, the great mourning of Mordecai and the Jews. By verse 4, Esther sent to Mordecai to inquire of the reason, is informed thereof, and is advised by him to intercede with the king for the nation. Verse 10, she at first excuses herself, but is admonished of the consequences by Mordecai. And then by verse 15, she appoints a fast and undertakes the suit. So verse 1, when Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went up went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. So could we say here that we have a midnight cry?
Yes.
Okay.
Now it's mid-city cry, but
Right.
but it's a symbol.
Correct.
Yeah.
And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. So there are rules. In other words, you have to be dressed a specific way to come into this area of the king's gate.
Yeah.
And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Now, I found the Hebrew here to be interesting, that sackcloth and ashes were laid under many.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that they would sit on sackcloth and ashes? I mean, some of the representation is that they would put the ashes on their head and then dress themselves in sackcloth.
Yeah, I don't know, but seems here like they're just putting it under themselves. Okay.
But the two verses that are referred to directly by the translators were Isaiah 58:5 and Daniel 9:3.
Yeah.
So is it such a fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him?
Mm-hmm.
Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day of the Lord? And then Daniel, and I sat my face unto the Lord God to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. Daniel was mourning. And I can say directly that I think Mordecai and many of the Jews were also mourning at this time as well.
Yeah.
So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. So how many maids were appointed under Esther? Do you recall? If we go back into Esther 2, I believe we can show from scripture that there were 7 maids appointed under her. Okay, I'm looking this up real quick.
Verse 9.
Okay, Esther 2:9. Okay, there it is. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. So there's Esther along with 7 other women. Then called Esther for Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, for he had appointed to attend unto her and to give him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. Now, here's Haytak. If we go through this, we may be able to prove that there is more than 7 chamberlains, more than 7 eunuchs that are appointed to the king and unto this with the women. Going to verse 6. So Haytak went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Now, do you remember how much in money this was?
It was 10,000, whatever they're called.
Talents?
Talents, right? Wasn't that the number?
Okay. So, in again, verse 9, Esther 3:9. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. So the Hebrew says, I will weigh 10,000 talents of silver. So if we count this by the Babylonish talent, this was being estimated as being over 2 million pounds sterling.
It's a lot of silver.
That's a lot of money, no matter how you look at it.
That was to do what?
That's so that he could do this, to enact a decree. Now, just back to one point, because my mic was off, so you didn't hear it earlier. Just dealing with the houses, there was 2 different houses that the women were housed in.
Right.
And isn't there different chamberlains in charge of each of those houses?
I believe so.
Yeah, because you were mentioning that there was more than 7.
Well, okay, you've got 7 chamberlains that are in front of the king, just like you have 7 princes that are in front of the king.
Yeah.
Then you have different chamberlains that are involved with the women.
Right. And the reason why he has eunuchs, because they're gonna, he doesn't have to worry about them.
Right.
Right. So they're going to be the ones who are going to deal with the women that he can entrust with the care of the women. So those are the eunuchs, the chamberlains.
Right.
So yeah, there's more. There's some that man the first house, there's some that man the second house, and then some that are before the king himself.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go into the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Haytak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai.
Now, dealing with this decree, in the Apocrypha, they do have the decree that was made.
Right, we went through that last week.
Yeah.
Should we review that?
Did we read the whole decree?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If you want, I'd be more than happy to bring it up.
No, that's okay. But there were some things that were odd about the decree. So that's yeah, I'm trying to remember.
14th day versus 13th day.
Right. That was the issue in the decree.
Because there's a question as to why there's that difference in the pocket.
Right. And so I did some research on that.
Okay.
And what I found is that there is a copy that has the 14th day, but most of them say the 13th day.
Okay.
So the one that was being used there said the 14th day, but there doesn't seem to be any reason for it other than somebody wrote down 14th instead of 13th.
Okay, so we should, at this point, for continuity, we would accept them the 13th day.
Yeah, it would be the 13th.
Okay.
Now, the thing about it, well, sometimes that can tell you things about the original language, because copyists make errors. In some language, the way that they write numbers, they can be misread at times. You know, depending how a person writes a number, right? If it's written out of Word, those can usually be more difficult to make errors about. And I haven't had time to really go back and look at this, but it is possible, because we know that we have this Greek edition of Esther, as well as the Vulgate, the Latin Vulgate edition of Esther. And we also have an Ethiopic version. We have an Aramaic version. We don't have a Hebrew version. Now, most people just assume the Aramaic is translated from other translations, except that the Church of the East believes that that's the original of the Old Testament. So I mean, they have a different view on it. So the Ethiopic Church and the churches of the East, the people who speak Aramaic still to this day in the Middle East, they would look at the Aramaic as the original, which it probably wasn't. But when it comes to scholarship, they have this really strong bias against Aramaic anything. Like, it's pretty clear that the book of Hebrews was probably written in Aramaic or Hebrew, not in Greek. Same with the book of Matthew. And yet Western scholars never accept that, even though evidence points in that direction, because they're a bias towards the Greek New Testament. And but yet, if you look in other scholarly traditions in other countries that aren't Western, they'll have a much different view about the book of Hebrews, what language it was written in, and so forth. And actually, the whole reason I went to university, because I'd been teaching myself Hebrew, I wanted to learn Hebrew and Greek so I could study the original manuscripts and figure this stuff out. And, so I came to the conclusion that the book of Hebrews was written in Hebrew, not in Aramaic, but at least, in Hebrew rather than in Greek. So, and that tells us quite a bit when we look at some of these, the Aramaic and the Hebrew book of Hebrews. It actually gets some things right that the Greek book of Hebrews gets wrong, which is interesting. But anyway, that's really an aside. But the point is, it can tell us something. The fact that it ended up as the 14th day shows that this was probably translated from something else where the person misread the date, not just for that decree part, but actually for the whole book. They had the 14th day of the 12th month.
It's interesting to me because my daughters many years ago gave me a gift of a copy of the Apocrypha that had been translated in 1938 by a man by the name of Edgar Goodspeed.
Yeah, Goodspeed, yeah.
And he is real clear that he took his translation strictly from Greek manuscripts.
Yeah, rather than the Ethiopic or Latin.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's times I'll go refer to that as well as refer to what's in the 1769 Bible.
Yeah.
And everything that I've got here that I put in these chapters of Esther has come strictly out of the Oxford Authorized Revised Edition of the King James.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, Esther spake unto Hatak and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. So now we have a 30-day period that is identified.
Now, so this is on, when Esther's in Esther chapter 4, this is on the 13th day of the 12th of the first month that this is occurring, right? Mordecai mourning,
Okay,
and all these things happening. Because there is an important point about this as well, is that this is the 13th day, and she's going to fast for 3 days, day and night.
Okay, my question on that would be, is this after the 13th day, or is this after the scribes have been called to write the decree?
Okay, so the decree is written and released on the 13th day. That's my understanding. Right, so they at the beginning of the year, they're going to be casting lots, and it doesn't take them all year to do it. It just takes them a matter of a bit of time to figure out which is the best day this is going to happen. And then they're going to write this decree and send it out. And that's going to be on the 13th day that they do that.
Right. Okay.
That's my understanding. And so Mordecai perceives all that's done in verse 1. And Esther's maids and her chamberlains, they come and tell her about Mordecai. Right, and then she sends him clothes, right? So all this is happening on this 13th day.
Okay.
And then, in verse 7, and Mordecai told him of all that had happened, talking to Hatak, which is one of the king's chamberlains, who's communicating between him and Esther.
Right.
And of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, and showed it unto Esther, and to declare it, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him. So this is Mordecai giving this copy of this decree to Hatak, right?
Correct.
So this is all on this 13th day. And then Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hatak and gave him commandment unto Mordecai, all the king's servants and the people of the kings of the provinces. And then it talks about this, that they can't come in until the golden scepter is handed out or held out, right? And she's saying, I haven't actually even been called for 30 days now, right?
Right.
That's what's happening. So then Mordecai's going to be told what Esther says. So there's this back and forth through Hatak.
So would that mean then that she had not been called since about the 12th of Adar?
Yeah. So yeah, probably 12th or 13th of Adar, right? So of the previous year. Now, I'm just going to look up the Babylonian calendar here for that year and see when the leap year is. So I have to go back here. Yeah, because that would have been in the 11th year of, oh, that's weird. Okay, never mind. Yeah, there's 12 months in the previous year, not 13. So it would be, if I go, yeah, it would have been from the 13th day of the 12th month of of the 11th year of Xerxes. She hadn't been called since that day.
Okay. But that's the reason I'm bringing that up is if that's correct, then this is giving a forerunner of the day of Mordecai before the Feast of Purim.
Right. Yeah, so it's interesting that it's been the 13th day of the 12th month since she's been called.
Right.
And now she has to go into the king. But it's about a date that's going to be on the 13th day of the 12th month in the 12th year of Xerxes. Yeah, so very interesting. It's a little detail I never picked up on.
Okay.
Now, you know, as we go on, we'll see some more things that are important about these dates.
Okay. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. And Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come into the kingdom for such a time as this? Now, if we look at this a little differently, and we take the Hebrew, the verse would read, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there respiration and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. In other words, would that mean breathing room?
Well, that's not how I'm interpreting it, but yeah.
Take a look at Job 9:18.
Well, it says respiration, but I don't know if that's what respiration, I mean, that may be what the word says, but I don't, you know, we use respiration to refer to breathing, but this just means a revival of your spirit, right? They wouldn't have used it to refer to breathing, even though that's what the Hebrew word is. That it's the word that we could translate as respiration, but I don't think it refers to breathing. I know you look at Job 9:18, he will not suffer me to take my breath, but filleth me with bitterness.
Right.
Okay.
So there again,
the way I interpret this is this respiration is what we would call a revival.
Okay.
I understood the respiration is a revival. Because a revival is you're revived because you've lost your breath and now you're going to be respired, you know, respirated. So now you're going to be able to breathe again. In that context, you come to life again. So that's the symbol of revival, which we saw in Ezekiel 37 when we were studying that. They had no breath in them.
Right.
But what Mordecai is saying here, that even if you hold your peace at this time, God is still going to deliver his people. But that deliverance is going to come from some other place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed.
Right.
And why would that be? Why would her and her father's house be destroyed?
Well, if you don't stand up for what's right, then do you have the ability to claim any of the blessings of the deliverance?
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, that could be part of it. Now her father's house, well, her father's dead, right?
Correct.
So what would he be referring to when he says thou and thy father's house?
He's referring to her.
Right.
Any progeny that she may produce.
So she's connected now to the king of Persia. Persia would be destroyed.
Okay.
Right. So she would be destroyed along with the Persians when God is going to deliver the Jews from whichever source that's going to come or when it's going to come. But what I think what Mordecai is saying here is that God's going to protect his people one way or the other.
Right.
But you don't have a guarantee unless you stand up to be protected by God.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting here. Now, we got about 4 minutes left. So we're going to see some things here that we're going to have to consider that are going to be coming. So we know here in Esther chapter 4, we might as well finish this off because there's just a few verses. So let's go through that.
Okay. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. And it's interesting. This answer is in italics, which means that was an added comment.
Yeah.
Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, or the Hebrew, go gather together all the Jews that are found in Shushan, and fast ye for me, neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go into the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, or Mordecai passed his way, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now, the portion that's here in the blue, what we should do is we should go through some of this in this next study.
Yeah.
Because this is going to go through what Mordecai's prayer has been, what he is seeing with this. It's also his reliance upon God and his character. Now, when we get into the next chapter, this will go on for several pages.
Yeah.
When we get into the next chapter, there's going to be some points that the Apocrypha brings out that are very specific. And it's going to be something that I think all of us are going to need to consider, whether we look to accept this or if this is going to be something that we would say that we cannot accept.
Okay. Okay, so one final point, just dealing with this fast.
Sure.
So this is on the 13th. So if you go back to verse 16 there, if you flip back.
Sure.
So it says that they will neither eat nor drink 3 days, and it says night or day. So I would assume that by the end of the 13th, she's going to begin this fast.
Okay.
So that's going to be the 14th. And that's Passover.
Right.
Right. So she's going to fast from the evening of the 13th. Right. So she's probably not going to eat before the 14th. So she's not eating. And then the 14th, she's not going to eat. And then the 15th, she's not going to eat.
Isn't that unleavened bread?
Right. That's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And that's the time that Christ was in the tomb. Right.
Okay.
And then on the 16th is the third day of the fast. But that's when she goes before the king, as we'll find out from chapter 5. It's on the third day. She doesn't wait till the fourth day. Right. She goes in on the third day of the fast. And it says fast for 3 days, night and day. And this is very similar to the 3 days and 3 nights of Jonah in the well, and Christ referring to the 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. But in both instances, they're actually marking the period, or at least in this one here and the one of Christ, from the evening of the 13th, commencing the 14th, to the daytime of the 16th, is called the third day. And it's also called 3 days and 3 nights. In this case, 3 days, night and day, which shows you that it's not 72 hours.
Right.
Right. So that's one of the things that we would have to recognize.
But is this also not the same or at least part of the same time period where Daniel was referencing how he did not eat any pleasant bread, nor anything, nor wine came to his mouth for that 21-day period that he refers to in Daniel 9?
Yeah, which starts on the third day of the first month and goes to the 24th.
So here is an example. I mean, Esther, being raised by Mordecai, would have understood that she was to celebrate Passover. She was to celebrate the release from Egypt. But
right.
because of this, she chose to fast rather than to celebrate the fortune of her predecessors. Daniel did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an uncommon occurrence for that time of the year.
Right. Yeah. And of course, we know Ezra traveled during the time of the Passover, because on the 12th day of the first month, they left the river Ahava to get to Jerusalem. So they're obviously not observing the Passover.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now in the chat, it's brought up that the fast proclaimed by Jehoshaphat while under threat from a threefold union in 2 Chronicles 23-12, great deliverance promised by a prophet, Jehaziel, verses 13-17, victory through faith in God and believing the prophets. This covered a 3-day period of victory celebration.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So 3-day fast has a precedent. It's also a symbol of the prediction before midnight.
Right.
So in this context of what we've seen, these symbols of midnight and the symbol of July 18th, which is about prediction before midnight, because July 18th is 3 days before midnight, July 21st. So we keep seeing these same symbols showing up again and again.
Exactly.
Okay, well that should be good if no one has any questions, and you can close with prayer if you want.
Okay, now are there any questions?
So somebody asked about Esther, Iran asked about Esther 2:22. Was the event 30 days before?
No. I would have to say that this portion with Esther 2 was occurring before. I mean, we were addressing that as being not in the 12th year, but that would have been more in the 7th year.
Yeah, it's in the 7th year. Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
Okay. Okay. So shall we close with prayer? Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for your guidance in all that we have considered today. We ask, Father, that our minds may be open to consider and continue to consider that which you would have us to know. Be with us through the balance of this day as we go on to those other items that we need to do. Help us that our minds may continue to be stayed upon your word and to be stayed upon you, so that in all that we do, we may be a representative to those with whom we come in contact of your character. Help us to this end. For this we thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.